Welcome back to another JS Drop from ThisDot. In this drop, Alyssa Nichol walks through her favorite component library, Kendo UI for Angular. Come check out this slick UI library with over 100 components, legendary technical support, and customizability like you won't believe. Let's get started.
Hello and howdy. I am so happy to be here today and talk about one of my favorite products, Kendo UI for Angular. So let's just dive right in. I know there's quite a few people who they're a little bit more analytical. They prefer statistics. So I've got some slides covering some hard facts about Kendo UI for Angular, the component library. And then I'll also show a demo app that I've been building, just so the other side of the developer world who likes to actually just see the product in action and get straight down to it. So I love mentioning this. We not only have Kendo UI for Angular, React, jQuery, and Vue, but we also have a whole .NET side. Many people who come up to me at booths maybe haven't heard of Progress, but they've heard of Telerik. So Telerik actually wrote many of these libraries, and over 6 years ago was acquired by Progress. And so Telerik is still around, still creating amazing dev tools, but we are under the name of Progress now. So I had someone actually ask me, they're like, isn't that a lot of work to write native for Angular, write native for React, write native for Blazor, right? And I was like, why, yes, it is. And that's why we have teams for every single one of these libraries. And so it's one of the big selling points and the reason that I am behind Kendo UI. I stand Kendo. So let's get into some facts so that we have time for demo. Over 100 plus UI components now. It's amazing that there's even that many components, but there are, and we are still creating and every quarter rolling out more. Built from the ground up for Angular, as I mentioned, and you can try it out for free, kendoui.com. Native UI components, not only do we have 100 of them and they're built in Angular, but we have a comprehensive set of UI scenarios that our docs will walk through a lot of these, because if you think about it, a lot of times you don't just need a button, right? You might need a button that's inside of a card, that's inside of a dashboard, right? This kind of nested scenarios. And so our team actually has built out quite a few of those, whether they're in demos or just in the docs themselves. We have things like data grids, schedulers, form elements, drop downs, so many, obviously. A very intuitive API and documentation that I'm actually really proud of. Tree shaking and AOT support, of course, couldn't be on the latest version of Angular without them. So the next part is design language integration. What does that even mean? So oftentimes, I would say more often than not, when someone picks up Kendo UI for Angular, they have something else going on in their project, right? Whether it's material design, whether it's Bootstrap, whether it's Fluent, whether it's something completely different. And we actually sit nicely next to any of them. So we do have themes so that you can swap it out. Let's say you're already using material components, but you need more, or you need more components or more features than they currently have. So if you start using Kendo UI, you can just click the material theme, download that, and that's the essentially like the override that you'll be using, and it will look and feel like the rest of the components that are already in your library. Easy customizable with the theme builder, which I may have time to show you at the very end. And we do have a SaaS-based themes, and we're actually this year focusing on getting those variables in our API more easily accessible, and like surfacing those, whether it's through the theme builder or just in the documentation, so that you can continue to customize even further. Accessibility compliant, and I'm going to go into that slide. Seriously, accessibility is the foundation for Kendo UI, and we will not ship a feature or a product, a component in our product out of beta without offering compliance for Section 508, WCAG, and WIARIA. But beyond that, we do realize that accessibility is a continually, it's just an always moving mark that we have to constantly maintain. And so we do take issues very seriously, and feedback for this, even this thing added to this feature would make it more accessible. So feedback.telerik.com. We really, really do take feedback very seriously. Backed by professional support. I was like talking with someone and they were like, so tell me why Kendo UI is better than product blank or blank, because there are competitors out there who have a very similar suite of components and features. And I think our technical support team is one of our shining points that makes us stand out. We have a ticketing system and phone assistance, 94% customer satisfaction rating, a direct line of communication with the Kendo UI for Angular devs, and as I mentioned earlier, not only feedback with accessibility, but with feature requests or with component requests. We really do have a strong feedback loop, and every quarter I see our roadmap moved forwards based on something requested by a customer. So I love that. I love that we have such a strong ties to the community. You can augment your existing UI stack. I think we touched on this a little bit, but you can include components one at a time, only use what you need, because I don't know if I've seen a project that have used like all 110 of the components. That'd be impressive. But obviously, using only what you need makes it easier. We do coexist easily with other UI libraries. We're going to talk about that in one slide. And there's no need to rip and replace. And the last point that is the reason that honestly I work for Progress and Telerik is because of how easy it is to customize and integrate with. I did a talk for ngConf a couple years back called Giving Bootstrap the Boot. And it was a very polarizing talk. People either loved it or they hated it. But honestly, building custom components alongside Bootstrap was the reason I came up with that talk, because it was such a headache and it was such a pain point in my life as a developer. And so when I was approached, it was about 5 years ago, to join the DevRel team, I had to give the components a try and see, can I create custom, things alongside it? How hard is it to retheme it or to reskin it? And so here I have a screenshot of an app that I'm going to show you in a second, where I took the Kendo UI list view. And the top two are just two different versions of that list view, where I'm maybe utilizing pieces of our API or not utilizing them to make it a simpler or a more complex list view. But then I also have the bottom one where I just went crazy with the actual list items themselves and customized it. I didn't need to use important tags. I didn't have to have crazy long descriptive selectors in my styles in order to make this come to life. I was very pleasantly surprised, and I always am, with how easy it is. So, we spent a long time on that point, but it's a big one. It saves developers time, whether in the short run or the long run, right? Whether you're reducing that architecture and API debt in the future, or whether it's implementing something quickly to like show a client or to get a product or a piece out. Yes, I like to talk about this because it was something that baffled me at first. So, as mentioned earlier, you don't need to download everything in order to have Kendo UI. And in fact, we have these, I call them mama packages on NPM, where things are nestled under. So for instance, if you need a checkbox, you're not going to download checkbox, right, at progress/checkbox. It would be at progress/Kendo -Angular-inputs, because checkbox is nestled under the inputs mama, right? And our documentation actually represents this structure. So if you're ever looking to, how can I customize the checkbox? What is the API structure that I have? Same thing with like, if you need a card, that's going to be underneath Kendo-Angular-layout. And so that's the sidebar there. Those are the big packages like barcodes, buttons, charts that you'll download. And then inside of those are the available components. But I like to explain this nesting and just kind of helps developers get jump started faster. Of course, you do have your exceptions where, like the grid, she's such a chunky just component, it has so many feature options that it needed its own package. So you will see those one-offs. Installing components, it looks, obviously we have schematics and you just use ng add progress. I need the Angular grid, or I need the buttons, whatever it is you need. They do have in our documentation, we walk through for every single one of those mama wrappers, those mama components. Not only is there the schematic that you can copy and paste into your terminal, but there's also the manual installs for those cases. If you have maybe feature modules, maybe your module list, right? Maybe there's some sort of reason that you need to go through and do the manual way. But let's jump on ahead. This one, I this is just for existing customers or maybe people who maybe people who are going to become customers. This has been a headache in the past before. And I just always struggle with dependencies. Like personally, whenever I'm updating something, I'm like, oh, and that dependency is yelling at me again. So removing obviously your node modules and your package lock, but then running this npx line to check for updates on existing Kendo Angular progress packages, and then reinstalling npm. This will save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. So screenshot that. But let's talk about components. I'm actually going to hop off the slide deck now, and we're going to go and check out. So I have this application. Some of you may or may not have heard of the Tour of Heroes by the very famous John Papa, good friend of mine. He's an amazing speaker. And the Tour of Heroes back in the day was pretty much the demo app for Angular. And you'll still see it scattered throughout Angular docs to teach Angular concepts. I took the Tour of Heroes because it was very boyish, and I redid it for something that I'm passionate about, which is My Little Pony. But not only did I do that, but I threw in a ton of Kendo UI components. So I'll actually show you this on GitHub real quick. Alyssa Michelle, you have to use a slash in order to get there. That's important. Okay. So I have it pinned under Kendo UI Tour of Heroes, and I call it releases because every time we have a release, I try to keep this side bar thing that I created. If we go and make it mobile shaped and scroll down, it stacks. But here, every release, I try to add, and we just like scroll down and see, and these are all living, breathing versions of these components, but like mini in the sidebar, because not all of them did I think of a really good use. Like there's so many components. It's difficult for me to fit them all within the context of Tour of Heroes. So I was like, I'll have this sidebar, and that's where I can demonstrate ones that I just couldn't fit in. So for instance, in our last release, we had an action sheet component added. You can click on this button and see it's like a little navigation modal view for mobile sizes that you can customize and pop down in the bottom. Instead of having like this, for instance, whenever we go to mobile, I need to have the action sheet at the bottom that's displayed. But here you'll see card components that I've customized with a cute little animation. We have, I can make you a little bit bigger. We can go back to the big screen size, an expansion panel here that actually has drag and drop enabled so that you can organize your ponies based on the ones that you like the most. Obviously, Pinkie Pie goes first, Twilight Sparkle goes last. If you don't understand, that's totally fine. But when we go into individuals, you can see here, I've got the skeleton component that's like showing that content is loading in before it loads in. Lots of cool components. Definitely recommend checking it out. We're going to go and open up our, pardon my scrolling. Let's open up the actual code. I want to show you here. I have these organized by, because I was just including so many components, as you can imagine. It was getting to be a lot. And so what I ended up doing was organizing them based on the component that I was including. So underneath here, you'll see that I've got like the search or the detail view, yes, but I also have like the Gantt or the heat map. And so if we go into hero card, you'll see here, I've got a commented out version. Sometimes they're a simpler version or just an alternative one for you to try out. So feel free to play around with the comments that I have, but it's just adding the components like Kendo card. And then inside of that, I have an anchor because I want it to route directly to the actual hero. But things like Kendo card header and an image that I'm doing that little cute animation on. And if we look at that animation, it is simply I'm positioning, which positioning, I know most people just kind of like flinched. It has its time and place. And then on hover, I'm just shifting it up by 90 pixels to make that cute. If we go back to our dashboard, and I have, I'm delaying the load here, but if we hover and you'll see it just shifting up, and I didn't need to use, as you see, I just said Kendo card image or Kendo card image hover, right? And those are just custom little pieces that I'm building in. This might not look that exciting. You're like, but that potentially could be because you don't know what our card looks like by default. So let's go and check her out. I am on the develop version of our branch. You can take out the dash develop if you want to see the official version, but I like to live on the edge. So underneath layout, again, I'm going to actually bump this up to ridiculous chunkiness, but layout is the one that you would npm install, and you would get avatar, card, drawer, etc., of components available underneath that. So inside of card, if we go to overview and I scroll down, you will see versions, just different versions of our card. You can look at the source if you want to like grab that and start playing with it right away. And the building blocks, really cool. I love our docs. They are constantly updated. As I mentioned, not only surfacing those new variables so you can customize, but just all of the API endpoints and explanations of things. I think our team does a really, really great job of explaining. So yes, as you can see here, the Kendo card, which is required to use the Kendo card, but you have optional things like the header, the body, the actions, the footer, etc., that make the Kendo card look, I'm going to go back down to normal size, so very different in different scenarios, right? Whether you have horizontal or vertical orientation, or whether you're displaying media, or you have a footer or action items. So that's just the card component. We have so many more. But yeah, I think that is Kendo UI in a nutshell. And I'm going to bring up my slides. I think I have a feedback slide here that I want to show because, again, our team takes customer requests very seriously. So if there is something that we're missing, give us a shout and you'll probably see it in our next release. But thank you for your time, and ping me on the Twitters with any questions. I am on Code It Live Twitch and Angular Air Weekly. So I'll see you around.